Okay, I have touched on this one before, but I think it's very important because as time goes on, I think we're going to start to see more effects of the lockdown in terms of people's thinking. I think one big thing actually that's really getting secondary attention, and maybe it should get more attention, is that the world is probably heading to a very big recession. And I think governments really need to be prepared for that. I'm no economist, but the way things are going with the sort of unemployment figures, it seems a lot of these jobs aren't going to be got back after the lockdown. So I really hope that governments are having a contingency for this coming recession. It could be very serious. And as we know from history, whether it's economic recession that leads to political extremes and potentially even conflict. So that's the side effect of all of this. It can't be understated. Now, about the social side of things, I want to talk about the lockdown regulations and restrictions. The Prime Minister has made an address from home. He's still got symptoms, so he's still self-isolating, and he's urged people to stay at home as all government ministers are doing and as all officials are doing. And that's understandable because the best way to prevent the spread of the virus is obviously to have minimal contact with other people. But I've said this before and I'll reiterate it. I'm a little bit concerned that there is sometimes a bit of a sweeping statement with this, like just stay at home no matter what. The government's own regulations state that you can go out for necessary reasons for food, for medicine, for exercise, right? Now, this needs to be clearly understood because there may be people out there, perhaps who are vulnerable adults, maybe they have some anxiety issues, they may, or more serious, deeper mental health issues, they may be reading this as we're not allowed to go out at all, but they may need to go out to get food. So I think there needs to be a clear caveat there that you are allowed to go out to get food. You're not going to be punished for that. Because one issue I have with all of this is there does seem to be mixed messages coming from the government because the regulations clearly state that, yet government officials, right up to the Prime Minister, are just making the sweeping kind of stay at home completely. Well, they need to add the caveat unless you're getting food or medicine. Now, I get it, there are people who are flouting the rules, there are people who are being blatantly reckless. They're just going out, for runs in the car and so on. So maybe those sort of situations do need to be more rigidly imposed. But the fact of the matter is, we are having strictest regulations since the Second World War. And by the way, earlier I mentioned the sort of deaths in this are equivalent to the Troubles in Northern Ireland. Another way to look at it is this is the deadliest disaster of any kind in this country since the Great Smog of London in 1952, which is estimated to have killed between 4 and 12,000 people in December 1952. It was a particularly damaging event, and in some quarters it's been forgotten. It's not a well remembered event, but it was very deadly. This was a particular concentration of chemicals in the soot, and it was basically swept away after about 5 days by a wind, but it killed about 12,000 people. Now, with 3,600 plus deaths, this is the deadliest disaster of any kind in the United Kingdom since then. That really puts it into context. Um, I don't think we should call for a total lockdown, and this is why. I think if you hand out those sort of powers to the government or to the police, it can be difficult to roll back on some of them. And I'm not saying after the lockdown the government would have ambitions to be a dictatorship. That's not what I'm suggesting. But I do think we need to be quite careful about this. Um, of course, we are in the middle of a pandemic. It's vital that we take this seriously and understand the importance of social distancing and so on. I'm not trivializing that for a second, but I am a little bit concerned with some of the totalitarian language that's coming from some people. I've heard people, not just politicians, but I've heard ordinary people talk about, oh, we need a total lockdown, but they're not really thinking about what they're saying. They're not just talking about the reckless idiots who are gathering in groups. They're calling for a total lockdown. Now, think about what that means. A total lockdown would mean that you would have nobody going outside. Think about the people who are supplying food. It's not just NHS personnel who need to be out. There are farmers, there are people supplying the food, there's presumably electricity workers would be essential workers. Well, if you're calling for a total lockdown, then prepare to have no television. Prepare to have power lines cut off. This sounds like hyperbole, but you need people to run those things. So I think calls for a total lockdown is very reckless, um, and quite alarming, actually. We need to definitely be practical. We need to obey the regulations, only go out if necessary. I'm on board all of that. I totally get that. I mean, at the moment, I'm only going out about once a week. I wash my hands before and after. I wear gloves. I adhere to the social distancing rules in shops. And the only reason I'm going out is to buy food about once a week. But I'm a little bit concerned with some of the narrative coming out here. If that's only aimed at the idiots who are, gathering in groups and so on, fine. But some of it's starting to sound like sweeping statements. And the people who are saying that, I don't think they've thought it through. So this is about understanding that the regulations are there for a reason. They're very important, especially on the day when we've seen almost 700 new deaths. But being in a pandemic situation, being in a disaster, doesn't mean rolling back totally on civil liberties. This isn't a trivial issue. It's really not. We need to ensure that we are not going to have a situation whereby people who are going out for legitimate reasons are unfairly stigmatized with those who are being reckless. Because I can see that happening. I can also see a situation if this lockdown rolls on indeterminately, we could even see social unrest because tensions will mount. I mean, at the moment, I think most people are being practical. They understand it's necessary and it will be necessary for some time. But I also think the government needs to give a consistent message and they need to make it clear stay at home as much as possible, adhere to the regulations, but you are allowed out for food. If they're saying don't go out at all, to me, that's not entirely sending out a confident message to people who don't have the luxury of just getting deliveries. Not everyone lives with family members, or I'm a little bit annoyed with people who think that they can understand other situation without knowing it. Not all of us drive, right? People are in different situations, so as long as people are using common sense, they're keeping the distance, and they're not going out for just trivial reasons, then I think that needs to be understood. And I'm getting a little bit tired of some of the narrative that's coming out from both officials and, frankly, kind of self-righteous members of the public who are saying, "Oh, just stay at home, idiots, all the time." No, actually, you can't stay at home all the time. You need to get food, you need to get medicine, you need to get exercise. If you live in a tower block, you can't really do exercise in those situations. So this needs to be understood. By the same token, of course, people who are being reckless, I would advocate or I would support tougher measures on them. But I just think we need to be a little bit careful that we don't become a nation of many tyrants. This is a serious point. It's not a trivial thing.